Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you. Great to have you here. If we haven't met, my name is Matt. Welcome to Lewisville. I see our Teen Challenge friends are here today. Welcome, you guys. Always good to have you hanging out. And if you are new and you have any questions after the service, if there's any way we can help, please just let us know. We're really glad you're all here. So when I was about, I think, 6 or 7 years old, my mom and I were out, and our car was running low on gas, and so she pulled in and used to get away with stuff like this, but she had me pump the gas at 6 or 7. I don't know, you don't really see kids pumping gas anymore, but that's what we did. And so I, filled up the car and then reached inside, and she handed me the cash, and I went inside to pay at the gas station. And when I was finished, I was walking back across the parking lot, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this bill kind of swirling around in the wind and caught my attention. I don't remember, I think it was maybe a $10 bill or something. Don't exactly remember, but you do what any kid, actually, I'd still do it today. I chased after it and I stomped it so it wouldn't blow away and picked it up. And as I was standing up, I noticed that there was all kinds of other bills in the parking lot of this gas station kind of floating and blowing around. And so then it became like that game show where you're trying to grab everything out of the wind. And I was just hustling, trying to find money. Now, I don't remember exactly how much. I bet it was probably, maybe at the end of the day, maybe around $50, $60. For a kid whose allowance was 25 cents a week, I hit the jackpot. I was pumped. And I remember going back to the car and showing my mom, and then she did the lamest thing ever. She made me go into the gas station and make sure someone hadn't lost that, which is the right thing to do. But as a kid, you're thinking, this is terrible. I thought I had hit the jackpot. Now I have to go give it up to someone. So I go inside, and to their credit, the gas station owner or attendant said they knew nothing about it and basically said, it's your lucky day, kid. And so I came out with like a small stack of bills, and I thought like the world was my oyster. So much so, like that left such an impression on me that here I am telling you this story all these years later. Right? I don't know what I spent the money on. I don't know what I did with it. I don't know exactly how much it was, but I do know that I was running around the parking lot grabbing bills as they were kind of blowing around. And for a moment there, I felt like I could do no wrong. I was on top of the world. I had like security and influence and power. So funny, eh? It's funny how money can be this thing that grabs our attention and can hold our attention in a way that isn't always good. And so today we are talking and beginning a series called The Other Side of the Coin, where we're looking at money. We're talking about finances and stewardship and giving and generosity and all those kinds of things that for some people in the church makes them a little bit squirrely. If you are visiting, please do not run for the door. We're not trying to center anyone out or make this awkward. We're simply saying that when Jesus talks and teaches about money and about finances, it wasn't just an arbitrary thing. Jesus wasn't just simply tossing away some comments here and there around money and finances and storing up treasures and what giving looks like. But he was very, very intentional in his teaching, and it was a core part of his ethic, a core part of what it means to follow Jesus. He was rolling this out for us. This is what it looks like if you're going to follow me, if you're going to call yourself a disciple or an apprentice. Part of our culture code is around this idea of being pupils together. We are doing our best in this day and age to understand the teachings and example that Jesus gives us, and to talk about what does it mean to live out these ethics here and now. And so today we're starting this whole conversation around money, and for the next 4 weeks going to do that. I do know that when we have conversations around money, depending on your experience, there could be a kind of a mixed bag here of whether you feel comfortable with it or not. It tends to be one of those things that we all know we deal with. We all know it's part of our world and our life, but for most of us, we very rarely talk openly about it. And there's lots of reasons for that. And they're valid, good reasons. And so I want to just flag a few of those as we get started, okay? I just want to just set the stage, maybe help you exhale if you feel like maybe you're the only one who feels this way. But here are some reasons where people feel like, oh, I don't really want to talk about money. So in no particular order, here's some that I brainstormed. You may have others. First one, shame and guilt. For some of us, any conversation around money and finances triggers a sense of guilt and shame and inadequacy. Perhaps you've had some financial struggles in the past, and so now whenever the topic or the conversation comes up, it kind of pings in that way for you, and you feel like perhaps you feel that you're the only one who's ever felt or dealt with this kind of thing, and so you feel isolated and alone. And I just want to say, you're not, right? One of the things we tend to do is we believe that we're the only one who's ever had a struggle, certainly around money too, and we feel like it forces us to withdraw. And I just want to say that In most of these conversations, I've had enough conversations with people where they've trusted me with some of their stuff, where I know, like, you probably would never share something with me that I've never heard before, and you're not alone in this when it comes to money. But sometimes shame and guilt, taboo. If there's ever a topic that feels inappropriate to bring up, it's like, so how are you doing financially? Like, it's not really something we do with each other. And tied to that is this idea of cultural conditioning. Generally, from an early age, we just know that there's certain things that you just do not bring up with, maybe even within your family very often, or certainly with people that you don't know super well. It's impolite. You don't ask people about their financial status, where they're at. Another one, fear of conflict. This is a big one. When couples cite the top reasons why they get divorced, finances is always on that list. The ability to communicate and talk about finances is very difficult, and so many people avoid it for fear of conflict. Now, if you're not married, I'm not saying you're afraid of conflict, but I'm saying maybe you don't even want to bring it up with someone else because their view on what does it look to make money, save money, earn money, give money away, it might be so radically different than yours that even by bridging the conversation, the topic, it may feel like it's going to lead to some type of struggle or conflict. Privacy kind of ties in with that too. Like, this is a deeply personal part of my own life, even though we all know that we deal with it in different ways, but you better not ask me about it. It's one of those out of bounds, tends to be one of those out of bounds things. Fear of being judged. Two ways on this that I think about it. So for those who are maybe lack some financial know-how and expertise, they may fear that if they start having a conversation around money or about finances, the fear there is that they're going to be judged for the lack of awareness and knowledge. So they don't want to say anything because, man, if I tell someone and I ask a question and it feels super basic, oh man, now people might judge me. Now, conversely, those who in the room who may have great success when it comes to money, you might be affluent. Maybe you don't want to talk about it because on the flip side, you don't want to tell people about how much you have, how you use it, how you invest it, how you spend it, because now you're on the other side worried about people maybe being critical or judging how you are stewarding your resources. So that judgment thing can go either ways. Impact of social media, don't need to spend time on that, but people like to portray like they have this rosy picture around finances and enjoyment and fun and pleasure and travel, and you don't know what's behind that. We just don't know, but we think everyone else is doing so well, but what about us? That comparison game happens. And another one is generational differences. So the Bank of America did a study recently. They found that millennials, so those who are born between 1980 and 1994, and then Gen Z, the 1995 to 2012-ish, people in that category are more open and likely to discuss financial matters compared to older generations. That doesn't mean that they have great financial literacy or have it all figured out. They also would have financial struggles, but there is culturally more of an openness to have that kind of a conversation. I'm a Gen X, born in 1976, and my parents would have been, my mom kind of at the end of the silent generation, my dad kind of the beginning of the baby boom generation. But in our household, I'm not sure what it's like for you, but we never talked about money. Like, I remember my parents took me to get my first bank account. And that was the day where you had to fill out a slip and then take it up to the teller, whether you're depositing or kind of old school ways then. I remember that. And then I remember when I got my first job, my dad was like, well, you have to give some of it away, save some, give some away back to the church. And then that was it. Like, that was about the extent of the financial conversations in our household. So even then, I don't know if it's that my parents were uncomfortable with it, felt like it was out of bounds, but even in my closest family unit, we did not really talk about it. So when was the last time you don't need to answer this out, but when's the last time you had a really honest conversation about money and finances with someone? Just think to yourself. Like, if you're married, maybe you're like, oh, like I remember and it was really positive, or maybe you're like, oh yeah, it happened last week and that was terrible. I don't know. Or maybe you're single and you're like, who would I even talk to about this? Like, we just don't talk about it, right? Maybe you haven't had an honest, open conversation about finances for a long time. So as we're getting into this series, one of the things that I hope is that we can normalize financial conversations. Not that you have to divulge all of your personal stuff to everyone. Certainly that's not the case. But to move it from this thing that we just ignore and avoid for a whole bunch of reasons, different reasons for all of us, to something that we see as being integral to what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, an apprentice of Jesus. If Jesus has really important things to say about it, and we take the teachings of Jesus seriously, in a whole host of other ways, then we also need to consider his teachings around money and finances. So let's get rolling. Grab your Bibles, turn to Matthew chapter 6. This will be our key text for the morning. It'll be up on the screen too. We'll follow our normal pattern. We'll think through and talk about some key things in the passage. We'll open ourselves up to wonder, biblical imagination. What do we wish we knew a little bit more about? Have some conversations with each other. I'll try to manage time well, so we have a few minutes to pass around the mics and listen to each other around this topic. And then some things that we're going to take away out of that. Also, before I read, I also want to mention that for some reason, I don't know why it coincides with this, there has been a number of people getting emails from someone who's pretending to be me. So it's coming from some random Gmail, but it says Pastor Matt Vincent. So I know of 2 people now who have received these, one just yesterday asking for money or gift cards or things like that. If you have received that, please let us know, but if you get one, I'm not asking you for a gift card. Okay, I'll just say that like it's someone trying to scam people. I don't think there would ever be a reason for me to email you and ask. I'd probably just call you up and ask for one, you know? I would never do that, I'm joking. So yeah, if you receive that, I'm sorry if you have it, it's not from me. But weird that kind of comes up as we're starting to talk about money, someone trying to scam our money. All right, let's read here, Matthew chapter 6. Let me just pray as we get in. So God, as we read this scripture, this teaching, Jesus, that you give, we recognize that in it is this idea of storing up treasure, of serving masters, of the position of our heart, the attitudes of our heart. And so, God, I just pray that you help us as we're reading this text to understand certainly what you wanted to communicate to the original audience and to your listeners and your followers in that context, but also for us today, recognizing that money is one of those interesting things that we all know we wrestle and deal with, or to all different degrees, but we really don't often talk super honestly about it. So thank you that we get to have this conversation over the coming weeks. We want to listen and lean in, God, to what you have to say to us. Give us a sense of safety in this room to consider these things in a way that only you can by your Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, let's read this. Matthew chapter 6, beginning at verse 19. Don't store up treasures on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. Store up treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. Your eye is like a lamp that provides light for your body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light. But when your eye is unhealthy, your whole body is filled with darkness. And if the light you think you have is actually darkness, how deep that darkness is. No one can serve 2 masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. Okay, let's talk through some key things here. Let's talk about kingdom ethics and competing treasures first. So in the context, I think it's really important that you understand where this passage of Scripture comes from, so that it's not like, you can see that I'm not just pulling it out randomly out of the air, so you have some understanding of what's going on here. So in this part of Matthew's Gospel, chapter 6, it's part of a greater collection of teachings of Jesus from Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7 that we refer to as the Sermon on the Mount, which for many of us will be familiar. Maybe it's the first time you hear it, but it's this collection, this really dense collection of teachings from Jesus. And he's helping his listeners and his first original audience, and for us still today, he's helping us understand what a kingdom ethic looks like. So if people have the question, what does it look like to follow Jesus? If you turn to the Sermon on the Mount, you get a real clear picture around certain topics and themes. This is what a kingdom ethic then looks like. If you want to know what Jesus thinks about certain things and what he's instructing his followers to do, here are the key points. If Jesus is the bullseye that we're aiming for in our faith, the Sermon on the Mount is like the little colored area around it. I don't know if there's any like dart aficionados here, but Google tells me that is called the outer bull. Now you know. Okay, so it includes things like how to understand and relate to the Old Testament law, he teaches about adultery, murder, divorce, enemy love, giving, caring for the poor, prayer, fasting, how to relate to each other, relationships, true discipleship, and also this text that we also read around treasures and money and possessions. So it is part of this ethic, this extended teaching that Jesus is giving on what does it mean to be followers of Jesus in that context and also here. And he starts off with verse 19 with this reference to storing up treasure. And he says, don't do it. Don't store up treasures on earth. And then he references moths, rust, and thieves who come in and steal and betray. So in this cultural moment, it's interesting because maybe for some of us still today, there are certain branches, certainly of the church even now, who link prosperity and blessing with the provision and goodness of God. What I mean by that is if you're doing the right things and being faithful and obedient to the law, if you do all the right things, then God will then bless you materially. And certainly that was a cultural belief in the time. So if you are faithful to the law, if you're an observant Jew, if you're doing all the things, then the thought was, well, God will bless us financially then. It was an outflow of this idea. And that's still kind of, you can probably think how it creeps in and still part of some church circles now. If you do all these things, don't worry, God's going to bless you. But then you're left with the question, like, I'm trying to live my life in a Jesus-like way, but those kinds of material blessings aren't coming. Well, what does that mean? Right? But in this day, it was linked to that. So Jesus is helping them understand, first of all, in their setting, in their context, don't do that. You think that you have all this wealth because you're doing the right thing. Those things are not linked. If you think that because you're wealthy, it means you are deep in your faith, Jesus is telling them you're wrong. You cannot use your material wealth as a litmus test to know how you're doing with God. Those do not equal. He's telling them, don't store up, because ultimately what happens? And then he uses these three descriptors. He talks about rust, he talks about moths and thieves. These symbols, these practical things that would wreck what you're storing, whether it be cloth or grain or treasure someone is going to steal. If you're spending all your time and focus building up these things, you're putting your pursuit and your effort in the wrong direction. Don't do these things. And he's contrasting that with a different kind of principle. He's saying, actually, you need to pay attention to the things of heaven. You need to store up treasures in heaven. Now, you'll notice he does not tell us specifically what those treasures in heaven are. You need to know a little bit more. You need to dig in a little bit further and understand the broad teachings of Jesus to understand that. But he's basically contrasting these two perspectives. If I store up and accumulate and look after myself, I'll be okay. And it's a sign of God's blessing, and I got to do that. And Jesus says, no. Your focus needs to be on something outside of the temporal realm that we live in. There's something greater that you need to pay attention and fix your eyes on. This is what you need to pay attention to. So they must have received this as like, oh, that's not what we thought. Now, I also wanted to say, this is not Jesus saying, please don't read this into what I'm saying. This is not Jesus saying it's not important to be well thought through, to do your best to plan for the future, or if you can save, or, he's not saying those kinds of things at all. Those are okay things. In and of themselves, those aren't a problem. Having wealth and accumulating things is not in and of itself a bad thing. It's where your focus and your attention is that Jesus is trying to correct and to call out here. And then notice in verse 21, he says, wherever your treasure is, the desires of your heart will be also. He's talking about being a heart issue. What is happening in your heart? Are you storing up all these things because then you think you're valuable, you have a sense of identity, you have a sense of like God's blessed? Is that what you're putting your stock into? Jesus is getting them to kind of check their heart. Like, what is going on here for you? If you think that's what it is, Jesus is saying that's not what it is. The heart here is like the inner soul and identity of the person. So the things that are in your heart is pointing to the things that you value most. What is happening here? Jesus is calling them out on this stuff. Michael Wilkins, in his writing, he says, if Jesus' disciples keep their hearts fully focused on the Father in heaven, then all other treasures of this world will pale in comparison. This will set the trajectory for healthy discipleship, including one's priorities, motives, righteous deeds, ambitions, security, personal self-worth, and relationships. Again, this is not critical of financial planning or good stewardship. The emphasis has to do with our heart, our intent, our motives. Jesus is, in a sense, rejecting any claim, any belief that if I just do enough, if I store up enough, if I accumulate enough, then I'm okay. He's saying no. Any system, any position, any understanding that gives you a sense of security outside of connection with God is futile. You're aiming and you're focusing in the wrong direction. Don't do those things. Another thing then in verse 22 and 23, he talks about the inner life shining. So he's continuing the theme of competing treasures. Right? It may seem strange as you read it because he's talking about don't store up, but store up in heaven. And then he switches to this eye analogy, this metaphor What's he doing there? Well, he's continuing this idea of teaching that there's something about your inner life that is glowing or reflecting and demonstrating who the master of your heart is. Your inner life is shining out here, right? So he talks about in verse 22, your eye is like a lamp, provides light for the body. And then he uses the healthy eye and the unhealthy eye. So the healthy eye in this context is an eye that is focused and aware and paying attention to the values and the ethics of the kingdom of God. I'm focusing on that, and that brings light and life into who I am, the things I'm paying attention to and focusing on. On the flip side, though, the unhealthy eye, now the eye in this context was often connected to a sense of jealousy or longing, coveting, wanting what everyone else had. So the unhealthy eye is always searching for more and more and more and wanting what others have. And when you get into that cycle of storing up, of jealousy, of coveting, of wanting everyone else's things, it changes who you are on the inside. There is a real danger here that Jesus is warning his followers about, telling them all about. Then I want to ask you this question: is your God green? So when kids are kids and they're reading storybooks or things about Jesus, whether it's in Kidsville or maybe at home, or it could be a normal question for a kid to say, well, what color is God? Because depending on what books you're reading and the artist's rendering of Jesus, is he very pale skin and blue eyes, or does he have a darker complexion, or is he, what has happened? It'd be a regular, thoughtful question for a young person to say, so what color is God? It's actually a really good question for us to ask each other. For us to say, is your God green? And when I say green, I'm not talking about like being sick to your stomach, like turning green, like, oh. I'm talking about money. Now, in the Canadian context, it's not really green, right? Well, I guess we have green, but we also have blue and purple and burnt orange and all the other colors. What color is the 100? Like a brown? Is there a $1,000 bill? You can tell I've never had one of those. Whatever color that is. If I email you asking for a $1,000 bill, it's not my email, okay? But is your God green? Is your focus, your attention all on this thing called money? So let me read that verse there from verse 24 on. It says, no one can serve two masters. For you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. So the word we have, money, comes from the root word mammon, which is Greek, which also comes from the Aramaic word, the language of the day, mammon, same. But that word is not a neutral term. It's not like this plain term simply used to describe currency. That's not what the term mammon means. Mammon was a way of personifying riches and wealth. Because if you notice the way Jesus is using it, he's not talking about money as an arbitrary instrument with which you buy your food or pay for your housing or supplies. He's talking about it in terms of a master relationship. There's this personification of mammon, of money, that Jesus is pointing out to us. And the distinction is very, very important. When he talks about you cannot serve God and be enslaved to money, it's because Jesus is saying there is the potential all of us have to not treat money just as this object with which we need to go through life, but actually for money, mammon, the personification of wealth, to become a rival God. That's how crazy this can all get. If left unchecked and going down the wrong path, money can become a rival God. And the rightful place that God deserves in our life in terms of shaping and teaching and transforming us, if given to the other, to this idol of money, can change us in a really dark way. It's why the early church in 1 Timothy gives this kind of a warning. It says this in 1 Timothy 6. It says, but people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people craving money have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. Jesus says you cannot serve two masters. You cannot be enslaved. You cannot say, I am fully committed and a follower of Jesus, and also be a slave to the pursuit of money. Again, money in and of itself is not the issue. It's the heart attitude. It's when money, mammon, becomes an idol. This is what Tim Keller says around an idol. Tim Keller, if you're familiar with him, he says, what is an idol? It is anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God. Anything you seek to give you what only God can give. It's substituting who God is and the rightful place he deserves in our life with something else. That whole idea of storing up, of treasures in heaven, of the eye, of you can't serving two masters. Jesus is helping his followers then and us today to talk about the danger of money. Now, it's interesting, right? We don't often talk about the danger of money because on one level, as I alluded to at the beginning, we all deal with money in some capacity, right? We all have to. We have jobs, we earn money, we spend money, we save money maybe, whatever. We all deal with it, but we often don't talk about the potential money has to control our actions and to change our hearts. But Jesus is clear. Actually, it does have that place. It does have that potential. It does have that potential power in our life. We have to be very careful. It is a radically countercultural idea for followers of Jesus to say money will not control me. In a culture and time where everything is about the pursuit of more, about identity and definition and power and influence. C.S. Lewis in his book, The Screwtape Letters, says, prosperity knits a man to the world. He feels that he is finding his place in it, while really it is finding its place in him. The power of mammon, the potential of mammon in an evil way when it is personified and becomes an idol is it actually gets a hold and changes us and not in the right ways. Okay, here's what I want to do. I want to have a little fun with this. I want to lead you through a little bit of a survey that helps us talk about what money means to you. So grab a piece of paper, pen, something that you can keep track of. Because you're going to need to score yourself or your phone. I just would also mention, you don't have to share this with anyone. Like, no one's going to ask for your scores. You don't have to feel outed in any way. But I do, as we lead you through it, want you to pay attention of it because at the end, it will all make sense here. It is a survey that is pulled from premarital counseling content. So there are a few questions that are phrased in terms of like a future spouse relationship or partner. You don't have to worry about that. Just think about it through your own lens. If you're married or you have your partner here, like you don't need to look at each other and compare notes and make sure you're all tracking. Everyone's going to be different. It's all okay. Just be honest with yourself. Don't overthink the questions. Just write it down. And for the sake of transparency, I am going to show you my scores at the end. So it will give you something to, not to compare, that's not the right word, but I just certainly want to show you where I kind of land in some of this stuff. So, and the scale, Stephanie, if you can bring up the scale is this. Every question will be 1 to 5. So as we read it out, 1 will be strongly disagree, and then you see the scale all the way up to 5 strongly agree. So you'll just give yourself a score, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and then we'll add them up. There's 4 rounds of 4 questions. Don't worry, it won't take too long, but is everyone good to go? What does money mean to you? Here we go. Question 1. I look up to people who have been financially successful. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I look up to people who have been financially successful. Just off the top of your head, just go for it, okay? Number 2, in making a major purchase, I consider what others will think of my choice. In making a major purchase, I consider what others will think of my choice. Number 3, having high quality things reflects well on me. Strongly disagree, disagree, undecided, agree, or strongly agree. Number 4, it is important to me to maintain a lifestyle similar to or better than my peers. It is important to me to maintain a lifestyle similar to or better than my peers. A score of 1 to 5. Okay, pause there, add up those totals from those first 4 questions for me, and then circle it or underline it, hang on to that, don't lose track, before we transition to the second set of questions. We good? Someone give me a nod. Am I going too fast? Is this okay? Yeah? Okay, let's keep rolling. Number 1, having some money in savings is very important to me. Having some money in savings is very important to me. Number 2, I would rather have extra money in the bank than some new purchase. Rather have some money in the bank than some new purchase. Number 3, I prefer safe investing with a moderate return versus high risk with potential high returns. Number 4, I feel more secure when I know when we have enough money for our bills. I feel more secure when I know we have enough money for our bills. Score that 1 to 5. And then pause here, add up those 4 numbers, circle and or underline so you can keep track of that total for that section 2 number of questions. We'll go to section 3. Here we go. Question 1. I really enjoy shopping and buying new things. No one elbow the person beside you. I really enjoy shopping and buying new things. Number 2, people who have more money have more fun. Number 3, I really enjoy spending money on myself and on others. I really enjoy spending money on myself and on others. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And question 4, money can't buy happiness, but it sure helps. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And then when you've got that, add up that total, circle or underline your total for the questions in section 3. Okay, section 4, here we go. He or she who controls the finances in the marriage calls the shots. Again, if you're not in this kind of a relationship, just consider, if I control the finances, does that mean I call the shots? What's your perspective on that? Number 2, I would be uncomfortable putting all my money in a joint account with my spouse or future spouse. I would be uncomfortable putting all my money into a joint account with my spouse. Number 3, the benefit of money is that you can have more choice in life and influence with others. The benefit of money is that you can have more choice in life and influence with others. And the last question here for number 4, I think each person in the relationship should control the money they earn. I think each person in the relationship should control the money they earn. On that one, it's amazing sometimes when I sit with couples who are about to get married and the idea that they maybe will share a bank account is like this thing they have never considered in their life. Like, we should probably talk about that one. Okay, stop, add up together. That total, circle, underline it so you have it all together. So what does money mean to you? Here's what the scoring all means. So here's mine. Don't worry, I'll talk about the totals here in a second, but let's talk about money means. So the first section of questions all have to do with identity. The second section has to do with security. Third section with enjoyment. And fourth section with control. Now, don't worry, like there are some people who, when you do scale surveys like this, they'll never do a 5 and they'll never do a 1. And there's other personalities who are like, everything's a 1, everything's a 5. So don't worry about like what your total is compared to mine. Just look for me, what is the one that is the highest number? Because you're kind of scoring against yourself on how you view these questions. So look at the one that stands out the most for you. The one that scores the most for you. And which of these categories does it fall into? Money means identity, security, enjoyment, or control. So you'll see my totals there. And so for me, the top score would be 16 out of 20 would be around security. Now, I've had time to think about this, on why this is, and try, to kind of psychoanalyze myself a little bit. Why is that the highest score for me? And why on section 4 do I have 5 out of 20? So just to give you a little bit on mine as you're trying to think about yours, about what your highest and maybe what your lowest is. So in my family, I kind of laughed a little bit that we never really talked about money too much, right? But as a kid growing up, not only did we not really talk about money, but we never really talked about anything to do with like purchases. All I would know is that sometimes my parents would say things like, well, we just can't do that right now, or we'll have to wait on that. And then I started, as I got a little bit older, I started realizing, like my parents really don't have a lot of extra money. Like we're kind of living check to check kind of idea, and when we can do something, we will. But really, when I became more aware of my peers, I recognized, oh, like they have these things or they do these things in a normal way with their family that we just don't do. And I started recognizing that, and I think somehow I began to internalize the idea of like, are we going to be okay? Bobby will tease me, like, I still think I eat way too fast, and I think something is rooted in there, like, I got to get what I can while I can with only brothers around the table. Like, it was like, get in there and get what you can. Not that my parents ever said that, but it was kind of the way it was. And then as, over time, when I left home and kind of became independent, like the time I moved out, I was then totally on my own, financially and everything, from the last day of high school when I moved in with a friend, and that was just life. And I think in that I've been a pastor now for 23 years. First pastor job I got, I remember they asked me in the interview, they're listing it as a full-time job, but the chair of the board, who was like a finance guy, pulled me aside. He said, are you sure you want to take this job? Because like, I don't think it pays enough, which should have been a red flag for me at the moment. But I took the job, and Bobby and I had to have multiple jobs on the side to keep things going, recognizing we couldn't do it. And, without getting into all our stuff, we've had really difficult financial things in our past where we've had to make really hard choices and sort things through. And even in my family now, I could see, like, there were seasons where my mom went back to work as my brothers and I got a bit older, where then I could see we had a little bit more flexibility, but generally speaking, it was tight. And then in our life and ministry and marriage, there's been different seasons, and certainly recognizing challenges ourselves. And so I think for me, the security one remains like a key thing, because there is the potential in me to worry about, is it actually going to be okay? Will we have enough? Will God show up and provide? Because I kind of root my sense of identity and security in that. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that has become an idol and it holds my heart. I'm saying there's the potential in that. Now, I don't know where you score. I'm not asking you to share this with me, but just pay attention to yours. I think one thing I want to pull out is that money means different things to different people. It'll be really clear to you, I think, as you maybe have a few safe conversations with people, that something that is your thing might not necessarily be the person besides you top score. Right? We know money means different things to different people. How we approach it, how we earn it, what we do when we have it, how we spend it, how we save, how much is too much, how much is not enough, how much do you keep, how much do you give away? Do you really give anything away? Why on earth would you do that? Why does generosity look like? When does it tip to radical generosity? What about tithing? Does it define you? What do you think about for it yourself? Does it give you a sense of identity? Is it all about enjoyment? Are you trying to keep up with your neighbors? Is it something you hang on to, or is it something that controls you? Money means different things to different people, even within your closest relationships, even within your marriage. I am sure money means different things, and we approach it differently. But that doesn't mean we ignore it. It means we learn to normalize conversations so that we can approach it in a Jesus-like way. And that is the challenge, to talk about our money and what it means to us and how it, and the potential, I guess, it has to control us, that we have to be really open to. So here's what I want to do. I want to give you 2 minutes. I want to give you 2 minutes to talk with someone about this. If you don't want to talk about your survey, you do not have to. You can just talk about the Matthew 6 passage, something that grabs your attention or something you're wondering about. Or if you're open, you don't need to tell your score. You don't need to analyze your score or where you're at. You could just say, hey, what was your top one? And you could share that. But again, I'm not telling you have to do that. I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I want to give you 2 minutes just to have a brief conversation. We're going to pass around some mics after that, and just continue to hear a little bit of what's grabbing your attention or making you pause or wonder. So I'll keep track of the time. All right, ready? Go for it. All right, going to call you back together. I know it's real quick here, but I just wanted to give you a minute just to chat and to consider some of the things that we've started to talk about as we were kicking off this new series. But hey, who wants to jump in and add something to the conversation? Anything you want to add, or something that you're thinking, something that's on your mind? Just throw up your hand, we'll get you the mic. It was way easier last week when we just talked about some obscure Old Testament passage, right? Now we're like, oh boy, money. But if you want to, no pressure. Someone, yeah, please, Lisa Marie at the back. Good morning.
Just going over it with my spouse, I think it would be very difficult if it wasn't pretty even. Like, we went over the scores and we're pretty even. But I was thinking, like, if you were one that wanted security and your spouse wanted a lot of enjoyment and spend, I think it would be difficult
Yeah.
in a relationship.
No, that's good. I mean, if you're not close, then I think the alternative or the requirement is then you figure out ways of working together in that, right? What you're saying is it raises your awareness of if you're not compatible, like we got to figure this out, else there's great potential for long-term struggle there for sure. Yeah, someone else. Michael? If there's someone else over here, just raise up a hand. We'll get it right to you. Good morning.
I guess the scores are higher than I thought they were going to be, so what that means exactly, I guess, gives some things to think about. But I was also just thinking that it must mean that we have a choice. If we're being told not to do one thing, but to do another, the implication in that is that there is a choice that we have. Sometimes we often, at least personally anyway, sometimes it's easy to think, I don't have a choice. I'm in this situation. I have to make the best I can of it or whatever, or I'm wired this way. I don't know if I can change or, whatever it is. But anyway, just that's the thought that comes to mind is the implication. There is a choice. Yeah. What am I choosing?
Yeah.
And why?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. Morning, AJ.
Good morning. I feel like oftentimes our relationship with money is set by maybe how we grew up or those early, like, young adult years or whatever. And then even if some of our circumstances change, our view of money doesn't necessarily change fully. So growing up fairly poor or whatever, like I've had times where I've had to be on overdraft to be able to afford things, like just normal bills, things like that. And then there was a period where I was working full time and I had a bit of extra money, but then I didn't know how to properly manage that, or $20 for something that would improve my life. Well, no, I can't afford that, even though I could have afforded it. And I could have just bought the thing that would have made my life a bit better, but well, no, I can't spend that because I'm so used to not having been able to afford that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Our family of origin, our experience, what we're used to, what shaped us, obviously continues to influence and shape us. I think one of the things around normalizing conversation around finances, whether it's with a spouse or a mentor or a good friend, whatever that looks like for you in a safe, appropriate way, as we normalize those things and are able to have those kinds of conversations, then we're not forced into the place of having to make decisions in isolation, which is always has the potential for danger, right? Whenever we don't have outside perspective or allow someone to speak into our life and we're relying solely on ourselves, the potential for us to have a blind spot is there. It would seem normal for us in lots of discipleship conversations to ask someone, hey, what do you think about this? Or I'm wondering about this. But for whatever reason, money is that one, or one of the ones that we just hold so personally and so in such a protected space for lots of good reasons, but we have to get out of that funk because else we're left all on our own in it. And in both, I think it robs us of the chance to grow as a follower of Jesus, and I think it also unintentionally makes us feel like we're alone in it all, and that's not the truth. We're the only ones who've ever struggled that way. We're the only ones who've ever experienced that way. No one will understand. I'm the only one struggling. Or if on the other side, I have all this, like I've been successful, or God's, there's all this kind of stuff, and I don't know how to use this or steward this right. What does it look like to follow Jesus and be wealthy? Jesus talks about wealth. Like, what do I do with all that stuff? We have to have appropriate, safe spaces to have these kinds of conversations because it is part of our discipleship journey. But what you said, Mike, is true. When it says, when it talks about the heart, verse 21, for where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And then in 24, no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. There is a choice we have. Like, there's a choice we have when it comes to our finances and our money and what being committed to Jesus looks like. I just want to end with this. Jesus is not after your money. If you've ever felt like coming to church and being involved with the spiritual community, it's because Jesus is after your money. He's not. But he's after your heart, which is way more significant. See, I think sometimes we say, well, the money is the most important thing, and if that group is after my money, I need to protect myself. Jesus isn't after your money. He's after your heart. And as your heart is surrendered to Jesus and you experience transformation change, then money loses its power as a rival god, and it becomes a tool with which you can use to further the kingdom of Jesus. It now becomes something we can use to fuel mission rather than something that defines us as a god. Our culture wants us to go one way, and Jesus says, you actually need to disempower that. It's not a rival god. Don't let it have that place and position in your life. You cannot serve two masters. And as you align yourself that way, as you give Jesus your heart, then the other parts fall into place. And money loses then its power to corrupt you. So here's what I want to do. I just want to ask you, who's your heart? Who has your heart? Where's your heart at? Is your God green? Are you struggling with this? Some real practical next steps for you. So our big small group is getting started again on Tuesday night, this Tuesday at 7 p.m. And if you don't know what that is, we've had a bit of a break here over Christmas and into New Year's, but on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m., we create space for people to come and continue the conversations that we're having on Sunday and to continue to dig in and talk about it. So starting up with this series again this Tuesday at 7 p.m., whether there's 15 or 20 of us or 50 of us, every week it's kind of whoever's free, but you're welcome to come and be a part of that and continue these conversations. You don't have to overshare. You can simply come and listen and add what you like. As part of that, we are also having and providing some help around financial coaching and budgeting help. So part of our big small group on Tuesday night, and if that doesn't work for you, please let us know, because there are some people in our church who are really gifted around this and really mature around this and can help you with really practical tools. So if you just I've never had a budget, I don't even know how to do that, I need to get organized, I don't know where my money's going, I don't know how to make ends meet. There are some people that if you're willing to bring them into confidence can help you try to figure this out and have a good plan. We don't want to leave you feeling like you're alone or isolated. It will not be me. This is not my gifting, but there are gifted people who will help you with this and are willing to do that for people in our church. So Tuesday night, or let us know if that doesn't work, but you are interested in some budgeting help, conversations, things like that. And the last thing is I just want to figure out and continue to push you on what does it mean to normalize financial conversations. So my challenge for you this week is have one financial conversation this week with someone, with a good friend, with a mentor, with a spouse, with a significant other, with a family member. Even if it's as simple as, hey, were you there on Sunday? What was your top score? What do you think that means? Even if that's all it is. Maybe there's some folks here who need to have more serious conversations with your partner because you haven't done it for a while. Whatever that looks like, have one financial conversation and approach it in a healthy way. Don't put too much weight on it. But let's start learning what it means to have develop normal, healthy patterns for conversations around money. Okay, let me pray. The band's going to come. We're going to close in song. But I'm really excited for this series. I'm excited for us to talk about these things, to demystify money, to take the power away from it, and to say it's about discipleship and part of our submission to Jesus. And so I'm excited for the coming weeks on this one. If you're willing and able, would you stand with me as we close in prayer and then sing together? So Jesus, thank you for this morning, and thank you for this chance to look at this text from the Sermon on the Mount and just to recognize the human tendency to want to store up and hoard and build our own treasures and how that can lead us in the wrong direction. Recognizing, God, you ask for our hearts. You ask for the inner parts of ourselves to be submitted to you. And it is a discipleship and apprenticeship type of conversation. Money is part of that. And so, God, as we're learning together, as we're having conversations out of this morning and also throughout this week, God, would you help us find someone safe to talk to be able to take that next step. Thank you for the gifting in this church and folks who are willing to help us navigate some of these complexities and some of these things that feel too personal to open up. Give us courage. Help us to know how to support each other well. God, help us to know how to steward really well the resources you entrust to us as individuals, as families, and as a church family, so that we can participate fully in the kingdom, that we don't miss opportunities to join you because we're putting our focus on the wrong thing. So God, help us to know what it means to have open hands and open hearts when it comes to money. Jesus, for your glory, for your honor, for our neighborhood and our city. Amen.